Hello, dreamers. Welcome back to English Chapter, the place where stories shape your future. Today, you're not just learning English. You're about to witness how one boy with thick glasses and a wild imagination rewrote the future of the world. So find a quiet moment, take a breath, because what you're about to hear might just awaken the genius in you. It started in a quiet neighborhood in Seattle. The year was 1965. In a cozy, upper-middle-class home, a boy named William Henry Gates III sat cross-legged on the floor, buried in a book. He was only 10, but he had already finished reading the entire World Book Encyclopedia. Every single volume. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened, because every word that came out of Bill's mouth had weight, clarity, thought. Other kids played baseball. Bill played with ideas. While his friends watched cartoons, Bill was decoding math puzzles, obsessing over logic problems, and sneaking into the school library to read about computers, machines that barely existed at the time. Even then, it was clear, this boy was wired differently. But genius doesn't always follow the rules. In school, Bill was a problem. He was too curious, too fast, too much. He would finish assignments before the teacher finished speaking. Teachers called him defiant. He called it bored. His parents didn't know what to do. He was clearly brilliant, but he didn't fit in. So they made a choice that would change everything. They sent him to Lakeside School, one of the best private schools in Seattle. And it was there, at Lakeside, that fate introduced Bill to the machine that would define his destiny. It sat quietly in a corner of the computer lab, a teletype terminal, big, loud, connected to a mainframe miles away. Most kids saw it and shrugged. Bill saw it and lit up. He wasn't just interested, he was addicted. He would skip gym class. He would sneak into the lab at night. He hacked time cards just to get more minutes on the machine. It wasn't about games or programming tricks. For Bill, coding was like writing music, only the orchestra was made of electrons. And in that lab, he met a boy who would become his partner in everything, Paul Allen. Two teenage misfits, one obsession, the future of computing. By age 15, Bill and Paul launched their first company. They called it Traf-O-Data. It was simple. They built a machine that could read traffic data from road counters and help cities make better decisions. It wasn't glamorous, it barely worked, but they made $20,000 before graduating high school. And more importantly, they learned something. They could build, they could sell, they could win. Bill wasn't chasing money, he was chasing possibility. But there was something darker too. Bill didn't sleep much. He would code for 24, sometimes 36 hours straight. He wouldn't stop until every bug, every error, every flaw was fixed. He once said, "I can be pretty extreme in my work ethic. When I'm in, I'm all in." Friends worried about him. Teachers warned him. But Bill didn't hear them. He had already decided the world was changing, and he would be the one to change it. At 17, Bill was already dreaming of a world where every home had a computer. Crazy, right? In 1973, most people didn't even know what a computer was. But Bill saw what others couldn't. Not just machines, but revolutions. And here's the lesson. Greatness doesn't come from seeing the world as it is. It comes from seeing what it could become. Bill Gates wasn't born rich. He wasn't handed Microsoft. He was just a kid who read everything, who asked hard questions, who refused to accept limits. When it came time for college, everyone expected Bill to become a lawyer, like his father. He went to Harvard, one of the best minds in the best school in the world. But Harvard couldn't hold him. The lectures weren't fast enough. The dreams weren't big enough. Something was pulling him away. And soon, one phone call would pull him out for good. The gates of Harvard opened, and Bill Gates walked through them with a quiet kind of defiance. He wasn't there to prove anything. He was there because everyone expected him to go. But deep down, even as he sat in math lectures and aced computer science, Bill knew something didn't feel right. Harvard was full of brilliance. But for Bill, brilliance wasn't enough. He wanted impact. In dorm room D304, while others were out partying or cramming for finals, Bill was glued to his Altair 8800 manual, the first affordable personal computer to ever exist. It wasn't just a machine. It was a signal, a sign that the future he had dreamed of in high school was finally arriving. He called Paul Allen immediately. Paul had dropped out of college already and was working at Honeywell. But when Bill said, "This is it," Paul didn't hesitate. Two nerds, one vision, one tiny opportunity to jump on a moving train before it disappeared. They weren't ready, but they didn't wait. Bill picked up the phone and called MITS, the company behind the Altair. He told them he and Paul had written software for the machine, a version of basic programming language. They hadn't. Not a single line. They didn't even have the computer. But they believed they could do it. They had to. So for the next 8 weeks, they coded nonstop. Bill handled the logic. Paul worked the hardware simulation. No sleep, no distractions, just purpose. And when they finally flew out to demonstrate their software, it worked perfectly. That moment sealed it. They had just written the first software for the first personal computer. History had begun. Back in Harvard, Bill sat in his dorm room alone. His heart was pounding. Everyone told him to stay. Get the degree. Play it safe. Be smart. But Bill didn't want to be smart. He wanted to be great. In 1975, he made the decision. He left Harvard. No diploma, no backup plan, just faith in a world that didn't exist yet. And in that moment, the dropout stigma didn't matter, because Bill Gates wasn't dropping out of education. He was diving headfirst into a revolution. They called it Microsoft, a blend of microcomputer and software. The office? A tiny room in Albuquerque, New Mexico. No windows, no furniture, no glamour, just code. Endless lines of code. They weren't trying to build an empire. They were just trying to make personal computing possible. But Bill had rules. He was intense, demanding, relentless. He remembered every detail, every number, every bug. People thought he was obsessive. They were right. Bill once said, "I studied everything. I read every manual. I memorized every line of code." I wasn't trying to be better than others. I was trying to beat myself. This was more than work. This was identity. Bill didn't believe in half measures. If it wasn't excellent, it wasn't acceptable. And his obsession set the tone for Microsoft's culture. Work hard, work smart, work always. Some employees quit. Some called him impossible. But those who stayed built history. In 1980, everything changed again. A small company called IBM came knocking. They wanted software for their upcoming personal computer. But Bill didn't panic. He negotiated, brilliantly. Instead of selling the software outright, Microsoft licensed it. That decision, one tiny legal clause, would turn Bill Gates into a billionaire. He didn't invent the PC. He didn't invent the operating system, but he saw the gaps. He connected the dots, and most importantly, he played long-term. When IBM launched its PC, running Microsoft's MS-DOS, the world changed overnight. Suddenly, businesses needed computers. Schools needed computers. Homes needed computers. And every time one turned on, it ran Microsoft. That's when the boy from Lakeside, the kid who read everything, the dropout from Harvard, became the most powerful name in software. But the journey wasn't over, because success, real success, doesn't just open doors. It makes people want to close them behind you. And Bill was about to face the storm of competition, lawsuits, betrayal, and the weight of running a global empire. By the early 1980s, IBM's PC was taking off, and riding shotgun was Microsoft's MS-DOS. It wasn't pretty. No windows, no icons, just code. But it worked. And more importantly, it worked everywhere. Every IBM machine ran it. Then clone computers ran it. Then the clones of the clones ran it. And with every unit sold, Microsoft's reach stretched further across the world. Bill Gates wasn't just a software developer anymore. He was the architect of the PC era. Bill wasn't interested in being liked. He wanted to win. And to win, he played hard. He read every contract himself. He negotiated every deal. He memorized market charts, licensing rules, and legal frameworks. He knew every rival by name, and he studied them like prey. He once told his team, "We're not in this to participate. We're in this to dominate." It wasn't arrogance. It was focus, the kind that doesn't blink. Inside Microsoft, pressure was oxygen. Deadlines were brutal. Code reviews were ruthless. Arguments were loud and often personal. Bill demanded the impossible. He expected employees to work nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took. But he wasn't just demanding. He was in it with them. He stayed late. He answered emails at 2 a.m. He challenged every assumption, every shortcut. To some, he was a tyrant. To others, a visionary. But no one ever doubted. Bill Gates lived for Microsoft. In 1985, the world got its first look at Microsoft Windows. It wasn't the first graphical interface. Apple had that. But Windows was different. It was open, flexible, and available to any PC manufacturer. Slowly, silently, Microsoft was becoming not just a player, but the standard. And when Windows 3.0 launched in 1990, everything exploded. Suddenly, software wasn't just for engineers. It was for offices, homes, classrooms, everyone. Word, Excel, PowerPoint. The Microsoft Office suite became essential. And behind every program, every upgrade, every update was Bill. But power comes with enemies. Competitors accused Microsoft of copying. Lawyers accused them of monopolizing. The U.S. government came knocking hard. In 1998, the Department of Justice sued Microsoft for antitrust violations. They said Microsoft was too big, too powerful, too controlling. For the first time, Bill wasn't just the genius in the basement. He was the billionaire on trial. The courtroom wasn't made for people like Bill Gates. He wasn't polished. He was impatient. He hated vague questions and vague answers. Reporters mocked his arrogance. The media turned him into a villain. But behind closed doors, he was bleeding. Because he had built Microsoft with everything he had, his youth, his mind, his soul. And now, the world he helped create was turning against him. But even while under fire, Bill never stopped thinking bigger. He started investing in research, education, and the internet. He predicted smartphones, voice assistants, and AI decades before they became reality. He said, "In the future, there will be a computer on every desk and in every pocket." People laughed, but they always laughed until they stopped. Bill wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing history. By 1995, Bill Gates was the richest man in the world. But there were no yachts, no scandals, no rock star lifestyle. He still wore the same sweaters, still worked 16-hour days, still obsessed over fonts, pixels, and code. Because it was never about fame. It was always about the idea that software could be the key to human progress. And for all the criticism, for all the pressure, one thing remained true. Bill Gates had changed the world. By the mid-1990s, Microsoft wasn't just a company. It was a force. Over 90% of the world's computers ran Microsoft software. Every business, every school, every government. Windows had become the default, the standard, the law. Bill Gates was sitting on top of a mountain he had built from scratch. But power always attracts challengers. In the beginning, Microsoft and Apple were partners. Bill had even developed software for the very first Macintosh. But over time, their paths diverged. Apple chose elegance. Microsoft chose accessibility. Apple focused on design. Microsoft focused on domination. And then came the betrayal. Apple accused Microsoft of stealing the graphical interface that made Windows so powerful. Steve Jobs was furious. He once shouted, "You're ripping us off, and I trusted you." Bill stayed calm and replied, "Steve, it's more like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and I broke into their house to steal the TV, only to find you already stole it." It was savage, and it was true. The tech war had begun. While the battle with Apple burned behind the scenes, a new force was rising, the internet. And Microsoft almost missed it. In the early 90s, Bill was skeptical. He didn't think the web would matter. But when he finally saw the wave coming, he pivoted fast. In 1995, he launched Internet Explorer, packaged inside Windows, for free. Competitors couldn't keep up. One of them, Netscape, accused Microsoft of crushing them unfairly. And that accusation lit the match for the biggest legal war in Microsoft's history. The US government sued Microsoft for being a monopoly. The courtroom became a battlefield. Bill was grilled, scrutinized, humiliated on national television. They showed footage of him dodging questions, acting hostile, and losing patience. The world saw a side of Gates it wasn't ready for. For years, he had been the boy genius. Now they painted him as a tyrant. But here's the truth. Bill didn't care about public image. He cared about winning. He said being nice is not the same as being fair, and being tough isn't the same as being wrong. In 2000, the court ruled that Microsoft had broken the law. The penalty. They considered breaking the company into pieces. The tech world held its breath, but at the last moment, a deal was struck. Microsoft would stay whole, but under tight government watch. For Bill, it was a turning point. He had fought, he had won, but the battle had changed him. He was no longer the scrappy visionary in a hoodie. He was a symbol, a titan, a target. And deep inside, something was shifting. Around this time, Bill began asking himself new questions. Not about software, but about suffering. Why did millions of children still die from preventable diseases? Why was malaria still killing entire villages? Why, with all this technology, were people still starving? He looked at his billions, and felt uncomfortable. He once said, "With great wealth comes great responsibility." If you have the power to save lives and you don't, what does that make you? The questions grew louder, and so did the call for change. In the middle of boardrooms and courtrooms, one light remained steady in Bill's life: Melinda. They met at Microsoft. She was smart, driven, and grounded. And together, they began to see life beyond business. They traveled. They met children dying of hunger. They visited hospitals without electricity, schools without teachers, communities without clean water. And it shattered them. Melinda said, "We realized we had the resources to make a difference. So why weren't we?" That question would lead them to build something bigger than Microsoft. By the year 2000, Bill Gates stepped down as CEO of Microsoft. The company was still his, but his heart was moving somewhere else. Because while he had built an empire of machines, he now wanted to help rebuild lives. The giants he'd fought were fierce: Apple, IBM, Google, the US government. But the giants he was about to face were different: poverty, disease, inequality. And this time, he wasn't coding his way out. He was giving everything away. Bill Gates once said, "I never took a day off in my 20s, not one." That sounds impressive, but it came at a cost. While the world applauded his mind, few saw the burden it carried. Friends disappeared. Sleep was optional. Burnout wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. He wasn't just running a company. He was the company. And as Microsoft grew, so did the cracks in his life. At the office, people whispered about his temper. He would interrupt meetings, slam whiteboard markers, challenge everyone, even humiliate them. He wasn't cruel. He was demanding, brutally demanding. To Bill, logic mattered more than feelings. Excellence mattered more than harmony. And time was everything. If you were late to a meeting, even by seconds, he noticed. If your idea wasn't airtight, he tore it apart. Some admired him. Some feared him. But no one forgot him. There's a moment from his early years that stands out. Bill and his small team were working on Windows 1.0. It was buggy, slow, nowhere near ready. Investors were panicking. The press was mocking them. Apple was winning. Bill locked himself in his office for 3 days straight. No food, no change of clothes, no sleep. When he finally emerged, he looked like a ghost, but the bugs were gone. He didn't do it for fame. He did it because he couldn't not do it. But obsession has consequences. As Microsoft exploded in value, Bill became one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. But with wealth came paranoia. He didn't celebrate. He worried. Worried that someone would outsmart him, outcode him, outrun him. He once said, "If you're not paranoid, you're not paying attention." So he worked harder, longer, colder. Relationships suffered. Vacations were rare. And even when he was home, his mind was somewhere else, usually buried in lines of C++. His marriage to Melinda was strong, but not perfect. She supported his mission, but she also saw the toll it was taking. She once admitted, "Bill has a hard time letting go. Even when we were on vacation, he'd bring books on molecular biology. He couldn't turn off." She respected it, but she also feared it, because when a person's identity is tied to their work, what's left when the work stops? And then came the guilt. As he began traveling the world for his philanthropic work, Bill saw what most billionaires never see: sick children with no medicine, mothers walking 10 miles for water, bright students with no schools. He looked at their faces and realized the absurdity of his own life. A man who once obsessed over bugs in software was now standing in villages fighting real bugs, mosquitoes spreading malaria. The contrast was painful, and it forced him to ask, what does it mean to truly succeed? He started to give, not a little, everything. He pledged to donate nearly all his wealth during his lifetime. He created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Its mission was massive: eradicate polio, rebuild education, reinvent global healthcare. No company, no stock price, no product launch ever gave him the same satisfaction. But the work came with new pressure. This time, it wasn't about market share. It was about lives. Every dollar misused meant someone would suffer. This was a different kind of obsession. Meanwhile, the world was changing faster than ever. Tech giants rose: Facebook, Google, Amazon. And even though Bill had stepped back from Microsoft, his legacy was constantly questioned. People asked, was he too aggressive? Did he crush competitors unfairly? Was Microsoft's success ethical? Bill never answered emotionally. He studied the facts. He published his thoughts. He moved forward. Because to him, regret was pointless. But growth, that was mandatory. There's a scene years later, quiet, simple. Bill is sitting on the floor of a small school in rural India. Children are laughing. He's helping one of them with a math problem. There are no cameras, no headlines, just a man and a chalkboard. In that moment, the world's richest man didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a teacher. And maybe, deep down, that's what he always wanted to be. But the boy who read everything, finally giving it all back. By the early 2000s, Bill Gates had won. He had built one of the most successful companies in history. He had shaped the way billions of people worked, communicated, and lived. But something inside him was shifting. The hunger that once drove him to dominate the tech world was being replaced by a different kind of urgency. Not to build something, but to heal something. It started with questions. Why are so many children dying before age 5? Why does malaria still kill 500,000 people each year? Why do some kids get textbooks and clean water while others get nothing? The deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable he became. And then he realized something that changed everything. The world didn't need more billionaires. It needed people willing to give everything away. In 2000, Bill and Melinda launched the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Its mission was simple but massive: to create a world where every life has equal value. They focused on the places others ignored: the villages, the slums, the forgotten corners of the earth. While Silicon Valley chased innovation, Bill chased vaccines. While startups raised millions in funding, he funded malaria research that no company wanted to touch. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't profitable, but it was necessary. He visited refugee camps. He met mothers who had lost 6, 7, 8 children. He sat with doctors who had no supplies, no power, no backup. And every time he flew back home, he brought their stories with him. He once said, "It's not about guilt, it's about justice. If I have the ability to help, and I don't, that's failure." They started with small victories: a new vaccine, a faster malaria test, a classroom with electricity. But those victories grew. By 2015, The foundation had helped cut child mortality in half in many regions. They provided access to clean water for hundreds of millions. They helped nearly eradicate polio from the planet. And they did it quietly, without headlines, without ego. Because this time, Bill wasn't interested in winning. He was interested in serving. But it wasn't easy. Critics said he had too much influence, that no single man should shape global health policy, that he was trying to run the world. He listened, he reflected, but he didn't stop. Because in the face of bureaucracy, politics, and resistance, he had one advantage. He moved fast. Where governments debated, Bill executed. Where systems failed, he funded. Where hope ran out, he stepped in. And that sense of urgency, the same fire that once built Microsoft, was now saving lives. Melinda was his partner in everything. She brought a human lens to the numbers. She visited schools, spoke to women, listened deeply. She reminded Bill that real change wasn't just measured in charts, but in dignity. Together, they made a powerful team, and for a long time, it worked. But eventually, even the strongest partnerships are tested. In 2021, after 27 years of marriage, Bill and Melinda announced their divorce. It shocked the world. People speculated, the media pounced, but they stayed silent. Their only public statement was simple: we will continue our work together through the foundation, because the mission is bigger than us. And that said everything. Even in heartbreak, the work continued. COVID-19 hit. Bill warned about pandemics years before it happened. Nobody listened. But when the world panicked, he acted. He funded vaccine development. He supported testing infrastructure. He pushed for global access, not just for rich countries. It wasn't perfect, but it mattered. Because in the silence of a global crisis, his voice, steady, informed, and calm, became one of the few people the world trusted. Bill Gates had once been the richest man in the world. Now, he was something else. A warrior for health, a strategist for the planet. A man who had turned his power outward. He still worked, still read, still asked hard questions. But the fire in him had changed. Not gone, just refocused. Because real greatness isn't just about what you build. It's about what you give back. And by now, Bill Gates wasn't chasing success. He was chasing legacy. For decades, Bill Gates had been the blueprint of success, the genius, the builder, the giver. But no one climbs that high without collecting shadows. And eventually, the world stopped asking, how did he build all this? And started asking, should one man have this much power? The criticisms weren't new, but now they were louder, sharper. Some said he was too cold, too controlling, too strategic. They questioned the early days of Microsoft, its ruthless business tactics, its courtroom battles, its aggressive licensing deals. Was it brilliance or bullying? Was it innovation or monopoly? Bill never denied the ambition, but he always insisted. We played hard, but we played within the rules. Still, the questions remained, because when you write history, people will read between the lines. Then came the personal attacks. Stories surfaced about his connections to controversial figures. Old emails were dragged into the light. Whispers about inappropriate behavior echoed across headlines. Some of it was exaggerated. Some of it wasn't. And for the first time in his public life, the narrative wasn't in his hands. People asked, is Bill Gates really who we thought he was? He didn't lash out. He didn't explain. He stayed silent, and that silence said everything. Not guilt, not denial, just humility. Because the truth is, even visionaries are flawed. Even icons make mistakes. It was a hard reset. For years, Bill had been used to solving global problems. Now, he had to sit with personal ones. Not with software, but with self-awareness. Not with a boardroom, but in solitude. And in that space, something shifted. He began speaking less, listening more. He focused not on being right, but on being real. He admitted what he'd gotten wrong. He acknowledged what needed to change, and he allowed himself to grow, publicly. That kind of reinvention isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause. It's quiet, and it hurts. But that's how you know it's working. He dove deeper into climate change, into pandemic preparedness, into reinventing energy and agriculture for the next century. And he did it without needing to be the face of it. Because now it wasn't about being the hero. It was about passing the torch. He poured billions into new innovators, young scientists, bold thinkers, dreamers from countries no one had invested in before. And when people asked why, he simply said, because ideas don't care where you're born. They only care if you're supported. In his 60s, Bill Gates was no longer the man who slept on the office floor. He was slower now, softer in voice, but still sharp, still curious, still relentless. But most of all, he was finally human. Not untouchable, not infallible, just a man who tried, who stumbled, who got up and tried again. Maybe that's the most important chapter of all. Not the triumph, not the billion-dollar valuations, but the moment you realize even the smartest people in the world are still learning, still growing, still figuring it out. Because success might earn you the spotlight, but failure, that's what makes you real. And reinvention, that's what makes you unstoppable. There's a silence at the end of every storm, a stillness after the climb. And somewhere inside that silence stands Bill Gates, not with his arms raised in victory, but with his hands full of questions, because legacies aren't built by answers. They're built by what you dare to ask. What happens when you dedicate your life to thinking? What does it cost to see the world not as it is, but as it could be? And what does it mean to leave behind something no one can erase? Bill Gates never wanted to be a celebrity. He didn't care about being loved. He cared about being useful. He wasn't loud. He was focused. He didn't show off. He built. And that's what made him different. From a shy boy with glasses to the mastermind of Microsoft. From courtroom battles and public backlash to a global foundation that gave away more than most governments ever could. His journey wasn't clean, it wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it changed everything. He didn't invent the computer, he made it personal. He didn't create wealth, he made it meaningful. He didn't just open doors, he tore down walls between privilege and poverty, tech and humanity, success and service. And along the way, he proved one thing, that being relentless is more powerful than being brilliant. Today, millions of people around the world drink clean water, survive disease, attend school, or launch startups because of something he touched. Not his money, his mindset, his refusal to stop learning, to stop asking questions, to stop pushing. He once said, "Don't compare yourself to anyone in this world. If you do, you're insulting yourself." And he lived that truth every single day. So what is Bill Gates' legacy? Is it Microsoft? No. It's the millions of lives lifted, not by his code, but by his conviction. That knowledge must be shared, that wealth must be used, and that a restless, curious mind is a gift if you use it for others. He's not done. He may never be. Because some people retire, others rethink the world over and over again. And Bill? He's still reading, still writing, still asking, what else can we do? Maybe the real legacy of Bill Gates isn't in the software he built or the vaccines he funded, but in the permission he gave the rest of us to think bigger, to work harder, to love smarter, to give more, and to live as if the future depends on what we choose to do right now. Because it does. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think bigger, like the video, subscribe to English Chapter, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because your next chapter starts now.